Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I am W.D. Foster Graham. I am the book review editor for Insight News. I'm also co host for the book chat, and today I will be your host. The Conversation of Al McFarlane has robust conversations and content on news of all that affects the African and African American diaspora. I am very pleased to announce that our subscribership to the channel, Conversation with Al McFarlane, has surpassed 1,000 subscribers. So we thank you for all the supporters that are out there. And for those who be new to our channel, you do a like, comment, subscribe, so that you are treated to everything that relates to the Black community. As I mentioned, today is our book chat Thursday, and I would like to introduce our guest for this edition. With her warm and extroverted personality, Navia Davis is a local author from Minnesota that obtained her bachelor's degree in communication studies from Gustavus Adolphus College. She also holds a master's of art in journalism from DePaul University. And she hopes that her books encourage children to find something to read that they enjoy. And she has written two children's books, including her most recent book titled Davis Practices Reading with Risks, and also her book Grant Practices Math with Manners. I had the honor and the pleasure of meeting Navia through the Black Children's Book Fair last summer, as well as the Minnesota Black Authors Expo in the fall. So it's my good pleasure to introduce Ms. Navia Davis.
Thank you, WD. So good to see you again. And hello to all the viewers that are tuning in today. I'm delighted to be here.
Yes, it's our pleasure to have you here. And I love seeing Black children's books and more of them. I was of the generation, as some people know, when the only thing that children's books has was, quote, The Further Adventures of Dick and Jane,
Yeah.
and nary a person of color in sight. So to see authors such as yourself say writing these books and engaging our youth, it is humbling, it is exciting, and it is inspiring.
Well, thank you. That is definitely part of my reasoning for writing the books, definitely to expand the catalog of BIPOC children's books and BIPOC books that have BIPOC characters in them and on the front covers of them. So I definitely am trying to join the community of Black authors that is looking to expand and looking to write more messages for us by us.
Oh, yes. Like I said, I was heartily agree. So tell us a bit more about yourself.
Yeah, so I was born in Minneapolis, born and raised in Minneapolis. Currently live in St. Paul. I went and attended high school at Minneapolis North High School. Shout out to all the Polars out there. So I'm very familiar with North Minneapolis. I went on from high school to attend Gustavus Adolphus, as you mentioned in my bio, and then went on to graduate school from there at DePaul in Chicago. I like to say that I've always been someone who enjoys both writing and can be a bit talkative. As a child, my mother definitely shared that about me. So I had to find a way to channel that. And one way that I did that was like writing in my journals. And sometimes that was writing in, just like gifted journals that were given to me, or my Lisa Frank journal. If the viewers can remember the Lisa Frank journals, they were very colorful and they were kind of popular in the 90s and early 2000s. So that was really, I think, when I knew I wanted to write, but didn't really know like how to go about writing. In my undergrad experience, I got a little exposure writing for in my public speaking class. So that was really kind of when I thought I knew I wanted to add on. And then further went on to graduate school where I took a class called Writing for the DePaulia, which was the graduate school newspaper. So I wrote for them during my time. And then I came and returned back to Minnesota where I began my corporate career. And then also, I was a freelance writer for Insight News. So, believe it or not, I've actually used to freelance for Insight. I want to say it would have been in like 2018 to 2019, somewhere in there. So, very familiar with Insight News, the publication, the website, and the digital content that you guys bring. Um, but that's a little bit about my life. Fast forward, I currently work at Medtronic by day, and then I'm a self published author, so I promote my books kind of in the evenings and on the weekends when I have time. And I also like to share that I'm a proud dog mom to a 5-year-old corgi.
Hey, hey, that's amazing, and thank you so much for sharing me.
Yeah.
So, so I would ask you, who were those mentors that you had while you were growing up? The ones that definitely had your back when it came to your writing.
Yes. So when I think of my first mentor with writing, it's going to be a woman by the name of Sharon Rolnick. And
Mhm.
Sharon was a woman who worked at Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity. I interned at Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity in my sophomore year of undergrad at Gustavus. And it was when I got my first writing assignment to write about housing and how they're being developed. And there were programs for people to sign up for, enroll in, so that they could become a homeowner at some point. So my first exposure to writing was through that internship, and it wasn't until I partnered with Sharon, who was also in addition to being my mentor, she was my manager of my internship. She first taught me about track changes and redlining scripts, and really, she kind of was like very constructive, but in a good way to say, hey, we want to help your writing get sharper, clearer, better was kind of her mentality. But that was my probably my first earliest mentor when it comes to writing specifically that I had. It was through an internship.
Hey, hey, we never know where our mentors will be, and
Yes.
we never know who they will be as we
Right.
make
You
that
don't.
journey. We really
Yes.
don't.
It's true. Like you sometimes end up crossing paths with people that you never know that can make such a difference in your life or help you reach the goals that you're trying to work towards. So very thankful for that internship and how I was able to build on it afterwards.
Most definitely. So like I said, you have that passion for writing and stuff. And since it's we're talking about children's books, what inspired you to write them?
Yeah, great question. So I have a sister too that I grew up with, love her dearly, and she has a son who is my nephew. And he was my inspiration for writing the children's books. My first book was published in 20 end of 2017, early 2018,
Mhm,
and I had an experience with him at Trader Joe's,
mhm,
and he wanted to buy like this candy that was at the checkout, and he had his own money that my sister had given him, and he basically had this $5 bill and he wanted to get this chocolate bar, and I was like, hey, if you do the math right, you can get it, but it needs to be correct math. Like, how much change are you going to get back from that $5 bill is kind of what I asked him. And so I was just chatting with him in the line about, doing the math problem. And a customer in front of me was getting her groceries bagged up. And she kind of complimented me saying, oh my gosh, I should totally be doing math with my kids in the grocery store. And I kind of looked down at my nephew, and I think I looked at him and I said, should Auntie write about this? And he got like really excited, nodded his head. He was like, you should write it, Auntie. And that's kind of how Grant practices math with manners was born. That's how which is my first book.
Oh, I love that inspiration. Um, One of the quotes that was in your book that just stuck with me was the one, "Manners in mind, always be kind." Tell
Yes.
me more.
Yeah, so that line, "Manners in mind, always be kind," it's purposely written to rhyme to help kids with rhyme scheme, but it's also meant to teach children that your manners can carry you a long way. Saying things like "thank you," being polite, "excuse me" is another one, can really carry you much further than you think. So I wanted children to not only have the alliteration and the rhyme scheme to remember the line, but also that it's a practice that they can use every day in school and with their teachers, with their parents. I wanted them to be able to reference it. And I love that I've gotten a lot of compliments on that line. A friend of mine said her son really repeats that line too. So it's purposely written that way, and I'm really glad that it's resonated with so many children and their parents and other, yourself as you were doing the review. It's definitely meant to be one of the pages that stands out in that book for sure.
And that is wonderful. And that being said, as we touched on it, your nephew's experience was something was a catalyst as far as writing the book. So I want to ask you, uh, I have seen when it came to Black boys and their reading, that one of the main reasons that their reading skills aren't as good, go no, is because have said that they don't see a character in the children's book that looks like them.
Hmm.
And I'd like to, like, if you could elaborate on that for our viewers.
Absolutely. So many of us, and thank you for calling attention to that, WD, because it's definitely, I think um, it's creating the stereotype that our young Black boys don't like to read. And I don't think that's the case. I think they just haven't found things that they enjoy reading, as you kind of alluded to in my bio. But it gets back to the key phrase that representation matters. Many of us have heard that phrase, but it applies in so many different ways. When it comes to children's literature, Black and brown boys want to see characters that look like them. They want to know that they are represented in the children's canon of literature. And if we're not creating books that reflect that, it may be difficult for them to get into reading. I know a lot of children's books are reading. There's a series or a book called Guts that's really popular right now amongst middle school and elementary kids. I know that there are a lot of other like well-known titles like Boom Chicka Boom, that when I was growing up, that was pretty popular, or Rainbow Fish. But the children tend to gravitate towards the illustrations and the pictures. Not that the text doesn't matter, but the pictures are really what's going to draw them in when they take it off the bookshelf at the library, or
Exactly.
when they purchase it from the local independent bookstore, or when they're gifted a book and they open it up in a gift and they see someone who looks like them. So I know that we have made strides in this area, but we still have a long way to go. It's definitely a niche of writing with children's literature that is growing, though. I will say you have celebrities that are writing lots of children's books to appeal to the younger audience. Gabrielle Union comes to mind. I know Tay Diggs has a children's book that some people may or may not know about, but it's definitely, a growing area. And I love that my books are hopefully going to be a part of this canon. I really hope that I can build on this. I want to share my books with this Black boy on the cover in different areas. The messages that are in the books are really applicable to today, and manners aren't going out of style anytime soon. They're
Indeed.
definitely one of those things where it's like we need manners at no matter what age, if you're in elementary school or if you're an adult. So I think there's an opportunity for us here to grow the literature when it comes to Black and brown. But I think we can only do that if we have creatives who are out there willing to write the literature, and illustrators that are willing to partner with the writers to add the illustrations with the text to create the books.
That is so true. That is just so true, Navia. And going on that take, no, what was your process when you wrote your first book, which was Grant Practices Math with Manners? I mean, the whole publishing process. I write fiction novels, and
Mhm.
I'm looking forward to completing my children's book. But I would like you kind of share with our viewers what that entails, from concept to holding that book in your hand.
Yeah, I love this question. So, as you mentioned, concept, you got to come up with an idea. I think that's step one. So once you kind of drill down your idea, I would say I started drafting on a Word document, just jotting down ideas for Grant. I knew that I wanted the subject to be math. I knew I wanted it to be a story about a math scenario, which was based off a true story that happened in a grocery store, which is the setting for Grant Practices Math for Manners in the book. And then I knew that I wanted to incorporate my nephew and my mom as characters in the book. So with those ideas in mind, I created a draft, and you literally can write page 1 colon and then your text, page 2 colon and your text. And I did that for 33 pages, and until I found a good concept. And then I started reworking. Then I went back in and re-edited, reworked the sentences. The manners in mine always be kind. I tell people that that page alone kind of took me probably a few hours just to not only find something that rhymes, but find something that was a sentence that was meaningful. So I worked on that one for a few hours. And then after I kind of had my draft put together, my outline, if you will, of my story, I decided to look for an illustrator. So I am not an artist. I admit that a lot. I am very much a writer and editor. And I simply went to social media. I remember going on Facebook and going on Instagram and looking and putting up a post saying, hey, does anyone in my network know of any illustrators looking to partner with a first time author? Because that was my first book, full transparency. So I want to say after about a week of letting people post, I got a few hits for illustrators, and then I kind of vetted those illustrators out. I narrowed it down to 3. I remember that. And then ultimately ended up partnering with my now illustrator, George Franco, who actually lives in the Philippines. But we do a lot of our work digitally. So yes, so you can see there, George was really great about bringing a lot of the concepts that were in my outline to life. Everything from the font to the cereal puffs box to the number 22 on Grant's t-shirt, which is actually symbolic of my nephew's birthday. He was born August 22nd, 2010. So we put 22 on the t-shirt because we wanted that to be reflective. And then just the shape of the characters, features. So everything from the eyes to the accelerated and exaggerated eyebrows that are up, the fingers, the ears, you name it. George partnered with me.
Oh, that is, it's a process and it's
Yes,
amazing.
it's okay. So yeah, I think from there, after I kind of partnered and got the illustrator, I decided once him and I had collaborated, and it took us quite a few months. My first book took me about 1.5 years to write. And that was mainly because I was only working on it in the evenings and occasionally on the weekends. So I would only devote about an hour a day to either editing, proofing, aligning illustrations with the proper text. And from there, then I got a PDF from George Franco, who's my illustrator. And with that PDF, I simply uploaded it to a self-publishing site called Ingram Spark. And from there, Ingram Spark reviews your copy. They then allow you to purchase a sample copy so you can see what it looks like bound up. And you can make the decisions to decide what size book you want. So my book, if you look at it, it's a perfect square. It's an 8x8, pretty easy. But there are other shapes and forms of book styles that you can get, like children's board books, which are for newborns. They're typically smaller, if you can recall. But then you have chapter books for preteens that are more rectangular shaped in length and shorter in width. So you get the option to kind of decide that as you're uploading your book on Ingram Spark. And then from there, after they reviewed it, it was self-published. I want to say within about 2 weeks after review, and that's how I landed my first book.
Awesome. That is just simply awesome.
So I do like to reference, I'm glad that you're asking about the process, because for me, it was not a short process. I know there are a lot of authors whom you and I met at the Black Expo, the Authors Black Expo. I remember talking to authors there at that event, some of which wrote and drafted and published books in 30 days, which to me was whoa, but if you're just doing text, it might be a little different. But if you're doing text and illustrations, it might take you a bit longer. So the process can really vary. It's really about how much time and energy you put into your books, as you probably know, and how much time you take to sharpen the sentences and sharpen the message that's coming out of your book.
Oh, indeed. My next question would be this: as you're talking as an independent author, what do you feel are, say, the biggest advantages to being an independent author?
That's a good question. I would say you get the creative freedom to write and create illustrations that you want to do. I think you really get full control over how your content and how your illustrations appear in the book, which I really liked. I liked having kind of that control. I liked having um when I liked having that like access to write when I wanted to and not really on someone else's timeline. Um yeah, it's that was kind of the advantage I think of self-publishing is you get to kind of write and be creative at your own pace. So it allowed me to still work my full-time job, still be able to spend time with my friends and family, spend time with my dog, without feeling like I'm on a timeline or I have to have 6 pages edited by the end of the week. You just don't really have that same timeline. You kind of get to create the timeline that you want and have the creative expression to write on the pages that you want. And thanks to like self-publishing sites like Ingram Spark, you can kind of make the books where you want. Anyone can write and self-publish books. You don't have to have like a journalism background like I do. You can just have an idea and a concept. I like to use the example of like the stay-at-home mom that says, "Oh, I don't have much to write about." Oh, yeah, you do. You're writing and interacting with kids every day. I'm sure you probably see a lot, being a stay-at-home mom. So that is just, I like to offer that encouragement to anyone that thinks that, oh, I'm not that great of a writer or my punctuation and grammar isn't that great. You don't have to be great or perfect at it. And that's truly like why editors exist, and why collaborating with illustrators is kind of a benefit to you.
I also, oops, I would also like to ask, what is an advice that you give to someone who wants to write a children's book?
Yeah, my advice would be just start. That's my advice. Just start with an idea and get something down on a Word document. Just start writing, start drafting things that you think are creative or fun. And by just starting, again, get opening up that Word document, getting your thoughts down on the paper is really kind of the advice I would give. Because by starting, you kind of already began the process on your own. You've kind of shown that like you're willing to commit, you're ready to like start this new adventure, and it just gets you going. I would say also maybe look up or Google different self-publishing sites. Things like Ingram Spark. If you're local in Minnesota, you can check out Strive Publishing. I'm a huge fan of Strive. I know KDP is through Amazon. They also have a self-publishing site that's accessible to the public. So if you're nervous about knowing where do I go, like how do I get it from the Word document into like pages on a PDF? Well, there's lots of options for you to explore. And with resources like Ingram Spark and KDP and Strive, they help you work through the publishing part. So you're not by yourself. You have somebody that can guide you. You have resource documents to help you put your book together.
It does make a difference, especially when you're looking at a children's book.
Yes.
Um, so I would ask you, because you said it basically took longer, about how long did it take for you to write that first book?
Yeah, about a year and a half. It took me over a year. Again, simply because I was taking my time. I had never written a children's book before. I really wanted to be thoughtful about the sentences that I was crafting and the message that I was sending out there in the book. So I really kind of took my time. And, in addition, when you're juggling a full time job, and in my case, sometimes an exercise schedule, there isn't much time left at the end of the day. You're either going to be spent from work or
Mhm.
maybe a little bit exhausted from your workout. And then you still have home chores and things that need to get done too. So it's like,
Yep.
you only get 24 hours in a day. So I like to share this with some people because with my first book, I spent a lot of time just writing with my laptop on my
Mhm.
lap in my bed because I was getting ready for bed, but the laptop was on the nightstand or it was on a bookshelf nearby, and I could just put it on my lap while I was in bed, jot
Yeah.
down some edits, maybe, rewrite some sentences, and then I could just close it and put it back on the bookshelf until the next day. So maybe I only have the 30 minutes or an hour at that point to work on it. But at least it's one step closer to getting all the sentences tightened and buttoned up until you finally can put a nice little bow on it and like finalize your outline for your book.
Okay. So do you have what you consider like a peak writing time when your creative energies or something are at their highest and you're able to act on those at that time? Or is it just depends?
That's a wonderful question. It really just depends for me. In the beginning, it started out in the evening. So I would say in the hours from like 6 to 9 p.m. was when I was doing most of my writing. But if I had a couple of hours on a Saturday, I usually would write midday on a Saturday around like, 1 to 4 in that hour. And that's all, so I really do say that it depends just because it kind of fluctuated depending on what I had going on that week. But most of my writing was done for the first book in the evening between 6 and 9, I would say. And then on the weekends, mostly Saturdays between like 1 and 4. Sundays, I almost never wrote because that was the Lord's day for me. So I
Right,
kind of
right.
stop and I just take a break. I let my eyes reset. I get a fresh set of eyes come Monday to look at like my outline and the illustrations. So
Most
it
definitely.
really just, yeah, I
Hey,
feel like, I want to be realistic about writing a children's book and with lives and families and partners or spouses. There's not much time sometimes. So you really have to carve out the time for yourself to write or edit. And in my case, meet with my illustrator who was phenomenal. Him and I would meet because the time zone was a little different. We would
mhm.
meet Saturdays like at 2 o'clock, which might be like 8 o'clock his time because his kids are down for bed and it's midday for me. So it really just kind of varied on both of our schedules at that point.
We are going to take a short break, and then when we come back, we will have Navia, share some of her work.
Are you or someone you know recovering financially from the COVID 19 pandemic, the lockdown, or any other reason? If so, help is available. Findhelp.org is a site to find a wide range of resources, including food, medical care, and more. The best part is based on your zip code. Visit findhelp.org, enter your zip code and the service you need. You'll get a map directing you to the organizations that can help you. Help is waiting at findhelp.org. If you need help starting anew, findhelp.org is the site for you.
Well, welcome back to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I am W.D. Foster Graham, and I'm your host for our book chat segment. And we are with our guest author, Navia Davis. And Navia has definitely been sharing part of our um, story about her journey as an independent author and also about her book, which is Grant Practices Math with Manners, as well as she has another book that's coming out called Davis Practices Reading with Risks. So, say Navia, again, uh, we would love our reader, or say our viewers would love to have you, share an excerpt from Grant Practices Math with Manners. Okay.
Hi.
Are you ready?
I am. Sorry, can you guys see and hear me okay again?
Oh yeah, we can see you.
Okay, so sorry about that interruption. But yeah,
Hmm. Okay. So as I was telling to our viewers, we would love to hear you share your book. at Grant Practices Math with Manners.
Sure. So like a live reading?
Yes.
Okay, you got it.
Okay.
All right, here we are. Grant Practices Math with Manners by Nadvia Davis, illustrated by George Franco. This book is dedicated in memory of my mother, Ella Mae Davis. It's for Orion and Naisha. Today, I use money from my piggy bank to buy my favorite cereal. I can't wait to get home and pour my favorite cereal into a big bowl and watch cartoons. Grant, says Mom, let me take a look at your change and your receipt. Grant hands his mom the receipt and the money after buying the cereal. Grant, honey, the money you got back is wrong. $5 minus $2 is not $1 strong. You need to go back and get it right. 5 fingers take away 3 fingers leaves 2. Mom, that's true. You got this, son. Just remember to use your manners. But what if the words don't come out right? Then you can say you tried, and Mom will step in and get things tight. So be brave and lift your chin as you walk back to the cashier with a grin. Grant repeats out loud, manners in mind, always be kind. Excuse me, miss, my change is wrong. 5 minus 3 is 2, you see. Can you please fix this for me? Sure, let me put on my specs. I often have to tell children what specs are. Specs are glasses. You're right, little man. I'll get you another $1 as soon as I can. Thank you, miss. Now the change is fixed. Mom, we did the math right, and I was polite. High five, son. Now we'll think about the importance of math and your sweet manners as we drive. At first I was scared, but now I'm glad you cared to get it all squared away. You tell me every penny counts. Now I know without a doubt. That's right. Remember, your manners will carry you far no matter where you are. Just be polite. The end.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you.
Because I see there's just so many teachable moments in this story. And you're right about manners. I mean, manners can carry you a lot farther than a lot of the negativity that's out there.
Oh, yeah, of
Especially,
course.
it does. And so because I would ask, so as adults, as parents, may, you know, what can we do in partnership to promote the literacy for our children?
Yeah. So I think two things come to mind to answer that question. The first thing I would say is be an example for your children. So if they you can demonstrate by you reading yourself, showing them that you read in the home. So that's one thing I would say, is if they see you reading for 20 or 30 minutes on the couch or in the basement or in the bedroom, they might be a little bit more compelled to go pick up a book themselves. So that would be my first answer to your part of your question, is to be the example for your children or for your nieces and nephews if you don't have children. My second thing would be utilize the public library. It's definitely, I feel like it's an underutilized resource that's available in many cities across the US and in the UK and out the country. But there are so many resources, events, children's corners, readings that are available and accessible at the public library. Most times they are free events or free resources, or for like, discounted prices. They're not typically they're more affordable, I would say, options there. So I would say those are kind of my 2 points about being the example, finding things to read at home so that your children can kind of imitate that, or the young adults in your life can see that. And then either taking them to the library or leveraging things like the Libby app if you don't want to step foot in a physical library, to check out books, be it physical books or audio books. You can kind of choose, or ebooks if you want to read it on a Kindle. That is an option as well. But just taking advantage of some of those resources. I personally still check out books at the library. Like the book I'm currently reading is by Asia Wilson. I think it's called Dear Black Girls. It was checked out at the public library in my local city. And the nice thing about that is you can kind of save some coins on purchasing books too if you don't read books more than once, for example. So that would be my 2 cents on how parents or guardians or even aunts like myself can be a good example to children to help encourage them to read.
Oh, well, that is so true because I agree with you because my father read so much, I picked up and was reading. And in
Yeah,
my case, reading translated into writing,
right.
by extension, because what they say, once to be a good writer,
You
you
have
need
to
to
be a
be a
good
good,
reader.
you have to
Yes.
be a good reader.
It's so true, WD. You bring up a fantastic point. I've heard that statement more times than I can count. And
Mhm.
that's part of the reason I try to continue to read things, each year. I pick up new books, preferably if they're by BIPOC authors, but not all the time, but I'm finding things that I enjoy reading. I love that your father set that example for you
Mhm.
and that it encouraged you to not only write, not only read, but to write in turn too. But they really do go hand in hand. Reading and writing go hand in hand.
They certainly do. So, well, going back to the process on that, when you were writing your first children's book, what were those, shall we say, unique challenges that
Ah,
came up along the way? Because I have a story, because I know me. It took me 5 years to write my first novel and 12 years to get it published.
yeah.
Of course, that was back in the early 2000s when I was first doing this, and
Hmm.
a lot of the options weren't available then. But hey, but what were your unique challenges when you set out on writing this book?
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that because every self-published author has challenges. And if,
Uh,
if they tell you that they don't, they're lying. Um, I would say one of my earliest challenges was getting a copyright page in my first
ah,
book. That was a doozy for me, if I could be honest. It was one of those things where I quite frankly, I made a mistake with my first book and it doesn't have a copyright page in it. And I
mm,
shared this mistake because I want viewers and other authors to learn from this mistake. Um,
right.
the copyright page in your book, so it's typically not within your page count of how long your book is. It is more of kind of the precursor pages. If you think about any book you've ever read, there's sometimes a dedication page, a copyright page, and then like one blank page of the cover of your book inside your book. So there's some kind of pre-leading pages that lead up to before the story actually starts, and the copyright page is typically one of those pages.
Mhm.
But quite frankly, I wasn't familiar at that time with how do I get a copyright page? How do I design one? So it wasn't until my second book that I actually found a template online from
Mhm.
Ingram Spark, actually, which is my self-publisher, and found out like how to like rewrite a copyright page with the details about my book embedded into a copyright. And then once I was able to like repurpose and write the details of my book in a copyright, I was able to then translate that information from the Word document to the PDF page, and then slotted the page accordingly in my book where it should be. So that was probably my biggest mistake with my first book, and I made sure to correct that with my second book. That copyright page is really important for authors. As you probably know, WD, it gives you creative rights, to your work and your writing. It also protects your writing in a lot of ways, so that there aren't people out in the world that can take your ideas or copy your ideas and that without giving you credit or attribution for using your writing or your book title or your illustrations. Any part of your book is protected underneath a copyright.
That is so true. And oh, we have a question here from one of our viewers. Shout out to Michelle Delicious Delights. Thank you for tuning in to us. Um, Her question is, do you recommend hiring an editor or relying on using software programs?
Ooh, fantastic. Thank you for the question, Michelle. I personally relied on editors within my community. So whether it was from school or whether it was at the library has writing classes. You can get editors or meet editors there. There's also a website called Fiverr. It's Fiverr, if I'm not mistaken. You can correct me on the spelling there. But Fiverr is a website where you can go on and look for freelance editors that will edit your books, be it your children's books, your young adult fiction books, your chapter books, your memoirs, for typically a fraction of the price of what like a traditional editor might charge. So checking on websites like Fiverr, checking the writing courses at the libraries are both good resources. Otherwise, there are programs online like Grammarly that you can, use the free trial for the first couple of weeks, and then maybe you can pay like a small percentage towards a subscription to check things like your punctuation and your grammar. So that's what I would recommend doing. If you have access, if you're in school right now and you're a student, most schools have writing centers. So you can go to a writing center and just have them proof or read or edit your copy too, so that you feel better and you feel more like your text is more polished and that you've got that right, the right punctuation and grammar in place for your book. But also know that like mistakes happen. I admittedly,
Oh, yes.
yeah, WD, you can probably relate to this, right? Like there might be
Hmm.
a missing comma even after you publish it, or there might be the font might have changed somehow when the printing came out. Like these things kind of naturally happen, so I would give yourself some grace in that area and know that mistakes are bound to happen. But I hope some of those resources help answer your question as to where you can find editors to read and review your text.
Yeah, it's a process, and they say vetting it. When for editors, what was part of your vetting process? Because I know I had to do some vetting when it came to editors, especially because I am an author of color.
Oh, absolutely. So when you asked about vetting
Yeah,
illustrators,
yeah, when you're vetting,
when
yeah.
I was vetting them out, yeah. So the things I was kind of looking for as I was vetting the three illustrators I mentioned earlier in our conversation, were illustrators that are willing to work with first time authors, and that was really important for me because I needed somebody who was going to be a little more patient. I needed somebody who was going to be able to like work with me over an extended period of time. In my case, it was over a year.
Mhm.
Somebody who had reasonable prices for their illustrations, because again, I need it to be affordable so I can make the books affordable to be accessible to people in the public. So those were kind of some things I was looking for. And then I wanted somebody who could draw like animations that look more like cartoons. So maybe
Mhm.
not sketches per se, but maybe somebody who could leverage like Adobe Illustrator, which is what we use to put together the illustrations for both of my books. Um, I was personally looking, hopefully, for a BIPOC illustrator. If I could find one of color, then that would be even better. But that wasn't like a strong criteria, but it was definitely something I kept in mind as I was vetting. And then I would kind of ask them questions through like Facebook messages and Instagram messages to start up a conversation to see
Mhm.
how their interactions are. Like, are you quick to respond, or do you take a little bit longer, but you have thoughtful responses when you do get back to me? That was important as I was vetting too. So I would say to like set up, like some of your non-negotiables, write them down, like write down 5 things you're looking for in an illustrator. So if you say you want a BIPOC illustrator, you want somebody who does cartoon animation, cartoon or animation illustrations. You want someone who can work with first time authors. Make this list. And then as you go through and you talk and connect with these illustrators, you'll get a feel for who you think has like who's a good match for you, who's a good partner that can help bring your idea for your book to life.
And that is even more important for us as the independent authors. To have, these are the expectations. No, this is the criteria. And as you said, it's non-negotiable.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Write those down. And that's again, when you are self-publishing, you get that creative freedom to do that. You get
mhm.
control and you have like the authority to like say, hey, no, I would prefer a BIPOC illustrator, and that's my criteria because this is my book and I have that authority. So really take ownership of the books. I'm sure you've done that with your stories.
Yes.
Um, Romance novels aren't easy to write. I've read a handful of them myself, and you really got to put some thoughts into the plot and the storyline as you're writing it. That do it in a way that makes the story kind of jump off the pages so that the reader wants to like just stay locked in and keep reading and keep turning those pages or keep tapping that Kindle, whichever way you're doing it, or to like listen to that next chapter on an audiobook. So those are some things, yeah, I would just say that you can be mindful of as you're writing. You get the creative freedom, the creative expression to write the story and the book how you want to.
That is so true. And now earlier you were talking about things like Black Authors Expo and Children's Book Fair. Uh, I like to say because we are engaging with our potential readers or
Mhm.
readers of long standing and stuff. So tell us more because you love the positivity. I love your energy.
Yeah.
So tell us more about your experiences as you have been out there, whether it be that at book fairs or you did a book signing, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I love this question. So, admittedly, I haven't been a part of the Black Authors Expo in Minnesota in the last like year or two, just due to some changing priorities in my life.
Mhm.
But I very much remember during the pandemic, partnering with the Minnesota Black Authors Expo, walking around, meeting you, meeting other authors there, and talking about, what's worked well for you, what hasn't worked well for you. But more recently, I did a read aloud at Falwell Elementary School in
Hey.
Minneapolis. That's probably
Mhm.
going to be the highlight at the moment, where I read my second book, Davis Practices Reading with Risk,
Mhm.
to about 250 elementary school students. So, and they were broken
Mhm.
up into 2 groups. But I partnered with another local author, and she kind of helped set up this opportunity. So there are opportunities for authors to do read alouds, where
Mhm.
you go into the schools and you share the message in your book. You read it page by page, and then at the end you can kind of do a Q&A. So what I like to do with Grant Practices Math with Manners, if I were to read that book out loud, I would have the students, the elementary students, do the math problem, the one math problem, 5 minus 3, how much is that? And then, they want to yell out the answer. They're kind of fast to engage, which is exciting. You can ask questions like, whose favorite subject is math? Some students will raise their hand and some won't. Some will say they hate math, which that's okay too. So I would say signing up for that read aloud is probably my most notable event that I've done in 2024. I hope to partner again, maybe in the fall, with the Black Authors Expo again, because
Mhm.
that would be something I would really be interested in doing. And then I'm just going to be on the lookout, for like the fun calendar. There's Minnesota Independent Book. I think Minnesota Independent Bookshop is coming up at the end of this month. It's on like a Saturday, so that encourages people to shop at local bookshops in your hometown to buy books that weekend. So you can go to places like Strive has two brick and mortars in downtown Minneapolis. You can go to Black Garnet Books. They are a local bookstore in St. Paul. Red Balloon, if you're looking for children's literature. And the list goes on. There, the public library. Go to your public library. You can find literature by BIPOC authors at your local library. So I've been trying to kind of organize my calendar in the coming months to determine, which events I want to participate in, and yeah, kind of go from there.
Hey, and speaking of where people can get your books, I know you mentioned Strive, or what other places can people tune in and get your book, buy it, share it with their kids?
Yeah. So the two primary places you can find the book will be on Barnes and Noble online and Amazon online. Those are probably going to be the two places you can find the books accessible, as shown on the screen here. You can really get a sense of, like, you get a sneak peek inside the book, or a look inside on Amazon, which is kind of nice. If you want to preview some of the pages before you buy, you get that option. If you want to bundle and buy, let's say you want to buy book number one and book number two that I've written, you can do that as well. So I typically like to drive community members and parents and friends and family to either Barnes and Noble online or Amazon online. So those are the main places. And then if you want to keep up with what I've got going on with the books, where I'm doing my next read aloud, if I'm
Right, right.
in a Juneteenth celebration, if I'm reading at the downtown library, you can follow me on Instagram at mn.author.nd. Again, that's mn.author.nd. And you can see all the fun, engaging things I'm doing with the books. Where's Grant going next? Where's Davis going to be next? Tune in and you can kind of see some of the events that I'm participating on. So yeah, lots of ways
Awesome.
to stay involved and see how I'm branding and marketing the books, and where I'm bringing the message to next.
It's always good to know where we're at, know what the options are, because there's so many venues that are available to us. And
Absolutely. Well, and then I want to put a plug for this platform we're on right here, the Conversation with Al McFarlane. Catch the
hey,
replay. Go on YouTube. You can grab this link after we're done with today's conversation. Share it with someone who maybe is thinking about writing a children's book. So
yeah, well, you've given us some invaluable information for those who are thinking about it, those who are in the process, and that makes all the difference. Now,
absolutely.
now I was thinking of your other book, Davis Practices Reading with Risks.
Yeah.
Could you, hey, tell us something about that book? We have a few minutes left, so if you'd like to share something about it.
Absolutely. So one of the really great features of my second book is that it comes with a list of reflection questions. So
Hmm.
that was my kind of new addition to the book, so that maybe teachers or educators, or maybe stay-at-home parents that are educating their kids at home, if they want to be able to use reflection questions to kind of help the students better understand the message in my book. So that is one cool, really fantastic feature that I love that I've added to my second children's book. It's kind of like reading comprehension. So when you read something and at the end of it, you kind of get a quiz or a test. And there's just a handful of reflection questions at the back of the books with the answer key, so you can kind of just read through it. But yeah, it's a great tool again for educators. It's a great tool for parents that are homeschooling their children. If you're looking for a text or a short story that is about a young Black boy who goes to the library and he kind of explores the different ways he wants to read, whether he wants to read out loud or read in his head, whether he wants to read on his bed or read on a bear. These are all like just a little insight of what you can expect in my second book.
You know something, Navia? You're talking about that second book. That could have been me as a kid.
Yeah,
That
yeah, I'm
could have
sure.
been me.
And if you're anything like my nephew, he used to enjoy going to the library, and he would be one of those kids that would try to climb the shelf, and you're like, "Well, nope, nope, can't do that at the library." Like, you really we have to go get someone to a staff member to help us get the book off the top shelf. So we can't climb on the shelf. Or but
Mhm.
maybe they're comfortable reading underneath the table because young kids tend to they just find comfortable places where they want to read with their books. And then something else that's mentioned in the book without giving too much of it away is notably and arguably, I admit not arguably, but admittedly, I've done this, but you tend to fall asleep sometimes when you read. Like books can kind of put you to sleep, which can be kind of nice, for if you're winding down at the end of the day, or if you're looking for a bedtime reading or a bedtime story for a child. Books are a great tool to do that. So that's just, yeah, a little more insight about my second children's book. I'm currently working on getting that one put in the Hennepin County Library at the moment, and then eventually,
Mhm.
hopefully, in St. Paul Public Libraries. But that is in the works. So more to come there. You can also again check the Instagram account to see when that second book will be available, and if you want to borrow it from the library, you can get on the wait list and do so, or you
Hey,
can just purchase outright, whichever is best for you.
there we go. There we go.
These books make really great, like, I would say baby shower gifts. They make great like back to school gifts. They
Mhm.
make good gifts for, just like celebrating a graduation, things
Mhm.
like that that you can kind of use to celebrate your kids, but do it in a way that involves literature. It's kind of fun.
That is so true. We have just a few minutes left. So as we close, I'd like to pose this question. Um, what advice would you have given your 12-year-old self about reading and writing and say representation?
Oh yeah. So I'm gonna go kind of in order: reading, writing, representation, the way you outlined. When it
Right.
comes to 12-year-old Nadia, I would probably tell her to make reading a little more enjoyable because I probably was just reading for school at that point. But make it enjoyable, meaning like bring a book on a road trip. I don't know that I packed as many books. I probably packed one or two, but maybe I could have done a little more reading in the car while my mom was driving. I would tell Nadia to just read more and maybe read shorter books so I can read more books throughout the span of a year. So, something like short chapter books or maybe a couple of comic books if you're into that as a 12-year-old. So I would tell Nadia, yes, to read a little more. In terms of writing, I think I did a fair amount of writing as a child. I'm gonna be honest. Between journaling in the Lisa Frank journals that I mentioned, writing notes if you're at church, you're taking notes on an actual journal or on your phone. I take notes at work. I make to-do lists. I am constantly writing out lists of things and events I want to participate in with my books. So I would say 12-year-old Nadia did a fair amount of writing, whether it was academic writing or just writing notes and journaling on her own. And when it comes to representation for 12-year-old Nadia, I really love that you asked this question. I would probably take heed to finding more literature that included little brown girls on the cover. I don't think I did a good enough job of trying to seek out those books that had brown girls on the covers of them. And I could have done a little bit more research as a 12-year-old, or I could have asked my teachers or my mom or my dad, like, hey, can you guys buy me more books with little brown girls on them, or take me to the library and help me pick out books. Can you show me how to pick out books with little brown girls? So at 12, I think that would have helped me understand representation a little bit better had I asked more questions.
Okay. Well, hey, this has been an amazing show. I thank you so much, Navia. Hey, as adding your voice to the world of Black children's books, because they say representation matters, and if we don't share our stories, who will? It has definitely been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, WD, and thank you for the conversation and the time. Author to author, I respect you and the craft that you create. Thank you so much for this time. It's truly been a meaningful conversation, a fun conversation to share and talk about my children's books. So thank you for having me on.
You're most welcome. This is W.D. Foster Graham on Conversation with Al McFarlane. Thank you for all the viewers and those readers out there, and we'll see you on the next go round.